Any staff here, they're running from room to room for the last 2 days, as you all did. Even Cathy, I mean, she spent more than 100 miles a day running from one room to another. And still, she's here. This is a great time that we're going to spend together. In a few minutes, we will really engage with you and presenting you what it is that ISOC is about to do in 2018, our strategic objective. We're very focused, and you will see we're very ambitious, and we won't be able to succeed in our objective if you are not with us. So we will work out something that is called the multi-stakeholder process in action. We hear these words in several meetings, but we will do that here with you. Collaborative process, we will hear from you what you believe we should do with you to make our objective, as I said, very ambitious, working in 2018. Before I get there, we have two very inspiring speakers with us today. The first one, I believe I should not present her. This is Cathy Brown, our President and CEO, who will give some thought about what is, in her opinion, the mission of ISOC and how we will get there. She spent fantastic energy to drive this organization to a more focused objective and very practical objective, and we will achieve this in 2018. And then I have Piers O'Donoghue. Piers is there. Yes, sorry, Piers. Who represents the European Commission. Piers is the director in DG Connect, whose teams made wonderful work, which we contribute to. They're calling the NGI, Next Generation Internet. This is similar to our future report. The Commission has launched this as part of Horizon 2020, and Piers will say a few words about this. So this would be the inspiring part of it, and then the staff of ISOC will be able to introduce to you our major campaigns for next year. But without further delay, Cathy, could you say a few words? Thank you.
Thank you, Frederick. Can you hear me on this okay? Yeah. Is it loud enough? Was that a yes? Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here with us this afternoon. I'd love to see everyone when we come together at the IGF and in many other parts of the world. I get to see members of the Internet Society, remembering that it takes all of us to do what we're here to do as a society, and that is to ensure that we have an open, globally connected, secure, trustworthy Internet for everyone. That's why we are the Internet Society. And what we do, everything we do, is to ensure that that happens. And there's a large group of us. There's almost 100 staff in 24 countries, but then there are 100, and I think when I checked it last, 126 chapters full of passionate volunteers around the world who themselves are creating opportunities for people to be connected to the Internet, and who are working to preserve and ensure that a secure Internet is available for everyone, everywhere. The opportunities that our chapters and our organizational members actually provide for folks are things that I hope you get to know and see more clearly with the new website that we got up this year. And I hope you are all looking at that site and taking in its features and looking for the information that's on the site. Over the last year, we've spent a lot of time listening to the community about the future of the Internet. What about the Internet do we worry about? And what about the Internet are we excited to be part of and want to see more of? So if you haven't already looked at the report called Pathways to Our Digital Future, you can find this report on the website, and it's an interactive report. What it tries to do is to create a scenario, an idea, and say, well, if these two things happen, one or the other outcome could result. What is our choice? Where do we want to be? What are the policy choices we ought to be making, the technology choices we ought to be making, and what are the conversations we have to have in order for us to get to the future that we all want to get to? It's a very good report, and I would hope that you would spend a little time with this. The things that this organization worry about have to do with the digital divide that results from not only geographies and economies, but also from gender and from other kinds of social biases that we need to and want to be aware of. We know that there are issues around security and safety. We know there are issues around new technologies that we don't understand. What is this artificial intelligence and what does it have to do with the internet? And we know that there are personal privacy issues, personal issues around how we want to use the technology. So there's areas of concern that this community has highlighted, and there's a lot written here and talked about as to how that looks. You trying to get my attention? The brand video? Okay, great. I'll get to that in a minute. So in my mind, there is rich data here that has been compiled by a group of staff, but which comes from all of you and a wider group of internet experts who live in our community, engineers, scientists, philosophers, if you will, and government types. So take a hard look at that, okay? Meanwhile, what we have been focusing on is access, that everyone get access to the internet, and this issue of safety and security. So I know that you're going to do a lot of talking about that over the next couple of hours. You'll have a couple of roundtables, and I think you'll have an opportunity to have some thoughts about that yourself to contribute. I wanted to also bring to your attention two things, and so I don't know if we can play two different videos or just the...
We can play the two, yeah.
Can we start with what the chapters have been doing and then go to the other one? Or do I have it mixed up now on you?
Yeah, I have the branding one.
All right, let's do the branding one first. So I want you to see what we are showing the world on our website and in our communications as to who is ISOC. You are going to see this film, and I thought it would be perfect to share it with you all because this is to represent us. So why don't you roll that film? And we do so much of that through our chapters. So in the last, how many weeks? 5 weeks. We've run a little contest about how we can bring the digital tools and the digital content that the world is amassing into our schools. And so how many entries did we have?
31.
31 different chapters have competed in kind of cool ways with every one of them, because I sat and went through your 3-minute videos, every one of them pretty inspiring about how you're thinking about doing this work. And I hope we still have the videos posted so that you all can go on and just give a little click. You're going to play the one video that is actually the winner? Yes. All right. So hold on. Here it comes. So the winner is Coding Sisters, the Turkey chapter. You can play it, play it, play it, play it. Sonia Herring, could you come up here, please, and accept this award for that 2017 Chapter-thon Digital Schools proudly presents to the Turkey chapter for their project, Coding Sisters, and for making a valuable contribution to the development and education of the Internet. Congratulations. And congratulations to all 31 applicants here. A fabulous job. What you have done is a huge contribution to the Internet, so thank you. Do you want to say one thing before you sit down?
Thank you very much. We're super happy, and my friends. Oh, sorry.
Thank you for this so much, and thank you for the entire team in the Turkey chapter. And we're very, very happy and honored.
All right. So I know you have a couple of hours of work to do, so I'm going to turn this back over to Frederic. And I wish you a very good meeting. I'm off to another room, X9, 4, 4, 5, 6, 10 floors away, and I'll be back later. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cathy. And congratulations, Sonia. So yes, we got some work to do. I mean, it's just not about fun, but as I said, you will help us crafting what it is that we're doing next year. Before this, as I said, we have the chance to have peers, I don't know who. The Commission is also embarking, of course, in their plan on how they see the future of the Internet. So, peers, if you could say a few words about the NGR. Thank you very much.
Frederick, thank you very much. Good afternoon. And you said before this, I'd rather you didn't say that, because the Commission wants to be fully part of this process. We're not separate, above, beyond. We want to be really in this process with you, which is what the Next Generation Internet initiative of the Commission is. Because what we've just seen, which is, by the way, very inspiring, is exactly the sort of initiative which we have tried to do also. We have a number of coding initiatives with girls and young women as part of our efforts to not just increase digital skills, but actually to try to encourage more girls and young women to come into science and technology. But that's just one of the things that we want to touch on. What I wanted to focus on today. Okay, can I rip it out of the? No. Okay, so people who come from Europe are used to the Commission shouting at them. So here we go. I'm going to revert to stereotype now. What I wanted to focus on was particularly, given that we were asked the question about shaping our digital future, was that we needed to, among the other things that we need to do, is to build trust. Yesterday, some of you will have heard my Commissioner, Commissioner Gabrielle, speaking about us needing an open, inclusive and secure internet, and she put a big emphasis on equality in the things that we've just seen through that video, for example. But on all of these issues, and also on the issue of building trust, what we need to have is a collaborative approach, what is largely a bottom-up approach. So like ISOC, organized with so many different national chapters, that is the way to go. And an organization such as the European Commission cannot do this from the top down. We would fail from the start. We have to federate and work with a whole lot of different stakeholder groups in order to achieve what we hope are commonly held objectives. We need to work with those who are involved in ICT, but actually also, more importantly, work with those who don't necessarily consider themselves to be involved but are increasingly affected by these issues. So we're talking about the service providers, infrastructure development, those involved in standardization, and of course the developers of software and hardware. But then all of the civil society communities, people who have particular issues that are of major concern to them in civil society and elsewhere, those working on particular health issues, those working with particularly with groups, specific groups of socially excluded, and so on and so on. So that is what we are now seeking to do in bringing what is some of our top-down work on research policy, for example. We fund research every year under the community research framework programs. And we want to actually marry that with bottom-up initiatives which are including research, but also innovation and technology development, but also increasingly, as we see from everything that's been discussed today, yesterday and tomorrow, that we need to have a governance structure built around that. So the Next Generation Initiative, Next Generation Internet Initiative, combines several of those themes, and we are at the stage of doing consultation, studies, but also within the European Union building up networks of national and regional stakeholders. So every member state has appointed a sort of a champion who herself or himself is then going on as a relay to find other groups. One of the things that we're conscious of, particularly in our research efforts, is that we tend to talk with the same people. There are certain groups who are very important to us as scientists and innovators, but we tend to have well-established channels of communication. And even though it's a bit of a cliche when we say that the next internet will come from whatever is the 21st century version of the garage where the first generation of platforms was developed, we have to be sure that we're talking to the next generation of innovators. And that includes social innovators, those who can actually use the power of the internet for good, for social good, for community causes. And that brings me back full circle to why I said one of the things that we need to do today to shape our digital future, while we are building this initiative, which will translate into funding and finance, but also into projects and collaborative activities, is in building trust, we have to put the citizen, we have to put the user at the center. So our Next Generation Internet has as its objective to create a human-centric internet. And just as has been said in several of the workshops this morning on cybersecurity, I was even challenged at one with regard to Internet of Things, quite rightly, that we have to have concrete actions. And what's more, we can't just impose rules and then assume that everything is okay. But specifically, we can have concrete actions, putting the human, putting the user at the center of the internet. What are we doing with regard to technologies that defend personal identity, that are, in other words, enabling the secure use of personal identity, actually using the control of personal identity as the way that an individual will access services, but also will be able to filter and decide for themselves how services work with them. How do we anticipate the development of artificial intelligence to make sure that users have not just a sense of, but in reality have control over the internet environment and are not controlled by that environment? And that is not just a philosophical or social objective. In the Commission, we also have some very hard-nosed economic policy goals. We have some economic development goals for the European Union for all of its economies and sectors. And it is absolutely clear that if the users and small companies do not have confidence in the internet, in an artificial intelligence-driven internet, they will not use it. They will be reluctant to engage fully with it. And so from an economic point of view, that is also a bad situation to be heading towards. But of course, that is why we feel it's such a good objective to, if by putting the human first, we actually make it easier for these technologies and services, which we know can have a huge benefit for society and the economy, we can actually then fully exploit their potential. So those are the ideas that we're working on with our stakeholders. We haven't reached out enough. We need also, using ISOC, using other stakeholder organizations, particularly those working at local level, with associations, with community concerns that we don't know about, and of course with startups and new enterprises. These are the stakeholders that we need to work to make this a reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Piers, for those words. And as you can see and hear, we share a lot of comments here on what the Commission is about to do when it's about the future of the Internet. And we're very glad that we could contribute with your objective. And by the way, thanks also for those many miles that you have spent with Commissioner Gabriel those last 2 days, because this community has been impressed by the very wise word of cooperation that the Commissioners emphasized. So now it's back to us and what it is that we're going to do. Piers, I'm afraid I won't have time for the people to have questions for you, but I trust that they will react certainly on what you said. Okay. In a few minutes, I will ask each of the staff responsible with what I call campaigns to give you a better view, a better sense of what it is that we're going to do. We have 4 campaigns. You will today hear 3 of those major campaigns. Those are a set of initiatives with a very global focus on what it is that we try to achieve in those respective areas. One of them is governance, the other one is community networks, and then the IoT, what we call trust by design. We will do that in a few minutes, and then we will turn back the mic to you, and you will have to work with some staff divided by 3 groups and reflect on some critical issues for us and tell us how you would do and what you will commit to do with us. As I said, we have very ambitious objectives, but we won't succeed without this community. So selfishly, I will start with the campaign that I will have the pleasure to lead, and this is called Trust by Design, and it covers IoT. So just, does anybody have an idea on how many, in 100 millions, how many devices will be on the market by, say, 2020 worldwide? Any guess from anybody here? Please. Yeah, I did it on purpose, actually, to just confuse you. Yes, it's by billions. So let me give you the answers. Some of the cautious figures that we've seen is 20 billions by 2020. I've seen other figures, 100 billions, say others, commenters of the IT world. But let's take Gartner and those cautious figures. 20 billion devices with very poor security and poor privacy will be on the internet soon. And when it's on the internet, it means it will be part of the internet. So we decide as ISOC that we should tackle this. The problem is known, but there is few that has been done so far to fix this. So here's the plan, and here's the objective. As I said, very ambitious. What we want is we want suppliers of consumer-grade IoT device to adapt security and privacy in their devices and services, no less than this. This is very ambitious. And how we want to get there is to three objectives, I would say, to just fulfill this goal. One is you will heard about the OTA, or Online Trust Alliance. This is a set of strategic principles that we believe that if manufacturers will embed those principles in their device and services, that will offer the minimum security, safety, and privacy that we want from a device perspective, a services perspective. The second objective is about users. We believe that users are still not very aware of the risk of IoT. I have seen figures that our comms teams are collected to us those last weeks, where I understand that 97% of people globally believe that IoT devices are their mobile phone. See the work that is ahead of us. I mean, we will have to convince them that there is something else when it's about IoT. So we will have to raise users' awareness, and it will help us indeed to have leverage on the manufacturer side and on the policymaker side, because this is a third objective. Convince and engage policymakers so that they create the legal or regulatory environment so that IoT is being secure and safe and privacy embedded. And by that, I don't mean regulation is a silver bullet, but regulation might be part of the solution. So, with this in mind, I have got my three questions for you guys, and in a few minutes I will call for one group to be constituted with some of my colleagues, and I will tell who it is. So please, take note. My three questions is, and where are they? Yes, here. First, do you agree that IoT might represent a threat to the open internet? And if yes, how? About consumer awareness, what would you do? How do you see your role as a community to just raise consumers and users' awareness? And I would also like to hear positive narratives, because I just don't want to scare users. That would be the immediate reflex that we may have. So please come up with positive narrative that we could just use in these endeavors. And then my third question is about policymakers. What would be the role of policymakers in your view? Is it all about regulation, or is this something else that we may ask regulators and policymakers to do in the world? Enough with the IoT Trust by Design campaign. I will call Jane to just introduce us the second campaign, which is about community networks. Jane is there. The floor is yours. Please, be quick.
Thank you, Frederick. And welcome, everyone. We're so happy you're here. As Cathy had mentioned when she was sitting up there before, the Futures report that she spoke about was a product of listening to the community. And this is something that Pierce has also alluded to, the importance of listening to our community, helping our community, broadening connectivity around the world. Key issues that the Futures report focused on: the importance of global connectivity and bridging the digital divide, the importance of connecting and empowering people, inclusion, capacity building, and sustainability. And all of this is on our website. If you take a look at the report, it syncs up exactly with the campaigns that we're looking at and focusing on this year. One of those campaigns is community networks. And community networks, just a quick definition for some of you, they're communications infrastructure deployed and operated by citizens to meet their own communication needs, and are being increasingly deployed and proposed as a solution to connect the unconnected, which is a critical issue for the internet society since our inception. So community networks are a critical way to shape local digital futures from the bottom up, from a local perspective. However, in many parts of the world, little is known about community networks and the role they're playing. So our campaign at the Internet Society, along with some of our key partners around the world, is focused on 4 key things. 1, deployment of 3 major flagship projects in 3 different regions of the world, including a focus on sustainability, business case, and scale. That's critical. Capacity building, which is training at the local level, local experts, so local, we love that. Community building, scaling the community of interest and building trust across communities, mentioned again by Pierce and Cathy. Policy-related issues is the 4th pillar. And there's a focus on rural, remote, and underserved communities. And again, I mentioned partners earlier. Nothing we do isn't without our great partners around the world, whether it's our chapters, organizations like APC, or some of the community networks who are actually sitting here with us today, like our partners also in Tusheti, Native American communities, and folks here from Brazil. And what we want to do today is hear back from you. We've chosen 3 broad questions that we would like your feedback on. My colleague Marit, who's sitting here, will lead on those discussions. So the 3 very broad questions are, 1, how do you engage marginalized communities to organize themselves? 2, how do you take a community network from a volunteer-based model to a volunteer-based business model? 3, how do you work with regulators and policymakers to fund community networks? Et voila, we're done.
Thank you, Jane. And then, last but not least, Dawit will introduce the governance campaign. Dawit, up to you.
Thank you, Frederick. One of the 4 campaigns that we have for the Internet Society is the Internet Governance, or we call it sometimes multi-stakeholder campaign. So why do we have that campaign? In fact, one of the findings of this report is that the governance environment is changing. There are new forces in the world, and there are challenging, emerging issues such as cyber threats that endanger the future of the Internet. And online life is becoming as important, or if not more important, than offline life. And governments cannot say that we cannot regulate or we cannot do anything about online life, because it's a big part of our life. So governments are increasing their interest in regulating the Internet, and this is coming against some of the things that we thought were achieved, like the multi-stakeholder model. We thought that this is going to be the model for the Internet, but this is changing. So there are governments who have embraced it that are now wavering their support. Some who have never embraced it are now saying maybe we should go to the multilateral model. So we thought that this model is really very important for the Internet. We will not have an Internet that we want, that we have always wanted, without such a governance model. So we are going to push for the adoption, use, and endorsement of the Internet multi-stakeholder model by key government and intergovernmental organizations all around the world. How we do it? By demonstrating that this model is still valid, that it can solve some of the new challenges that we have on the Internet. Frederick talked about many challenges that we have with IoT. We have community networks, we have artificial intelligence. All these new problems can be solved using the old multi-stakeholder model. We want to continue to influence IG discussions around the world. The IGF is one of them, but others like G7, G20, where we'll continue to engage. And we would like to work on capacity building, because we know that ISOC alone cannot do that. We need people who understand the model, who can really be soldiers for the model, and other result. Well, for that we need to have more capacity building. And of course, we need communication. It is important that Internet governance is understood by more people. A study done by our comms department shows that even though some of us in this area think that Internet governance is well known, there is very little discussion on Internet governance by the general public. This has to change so that it becomes something that everybody treasures. So we would like to discuss this campaign, the objective of this campaign, and some of the strategies of this campaign with you. So the first question that we'll have for you is, who do you think are the current leaders in the multi-stakeholder discussions, and who do you think will be the leaders of tomorrow in this area? And who is going to, which stakeholders will take the back seat? The second question is, not all areas will benefit from this model. There will be some areas that government wouldn't want to discuss in a multi-stakeholder manner, for instance. So which areas do you think are most appropriate for the multi-stakeholder model? Last but not least, what are the threats that the multi-stakeholder model faces today? So these are the three questions. I will be sitting around there, and if you want to join this group to discuss those issues, please come over there.
Thank you, David. So this is now the fun part starting, and it is how we can move a room of 200 persons to move in three different groups, right? This is a beautiful symbol of the multi-stakeholder process in action. So I got here Jane and Marit. Please stand up, and you guys will represent what Jane has exposed, and this is community network. So people interested to discuss those issues, please move slowly to that part of the room. In front of me, I have got Nicolas, please stand up, and Geran, please stand up in just in the middle. And the discussion here will be about IoT trusts and the questions that are raised. And last but not least, as David indicates, the third group will be that side of the room discussing governance issues. So 1, 2, 3, please move.
Let's go. And we have 30 minutes for this exercise. Like, that's 25 minutes. I'm putting my
As I said, come on.
We're going to make it. It's going to be fun.
Okay.
But I will put my alarm to make sure we don't forget. I will put
Pierce, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's great.
We'll move over there because it's going to be too
sorry.
noisy.
Thank you so much.
That's it.
Just a note for those who want to be in the IoT group, we'll move a bit at the back of the room, so it's a bit less noisy.
Minutes for the delay, and that's it.
Community networks, are we all here? You can also join these side rows, maybe on that side if you want to hear, because the setup is not ideal. So I'm gonna be rude and use the microphone so that we can hear each other. Even the others might be a bit disturbed. I would suggest we had 3 questions. We have limited time, that we pick 2 of them. And because the table is so long, Jane will moderate that end of the table. I will moderate this end of the table, and we have different questions so that we actually can have a proper discussion and everybody can contribute. So the questions were, I'm going to read them out to you.
Hi, everyone. We're going to try and get started. There were 3 questions. I'll read them again, and you all get to pick which one we deal with.